Hi there, this is Sarah Bacher. I'm the Market Garden Manager here at Heifer USA, and right now we are standing in part of our market garden. So let's take a look at the Florida weave that we're doing on these out here. Right now, in this portion of our market garden, we do have several different succession plantings of some of our beefsteak tomatoes. So you'll notice that this is definitely in an open air location, which is very different from what we have our heirloom tomatoes in. Those heirloom tomatoes are under a high tunnel, and so they are in a completely controlled environment, whereas our tomatoes back here are completely open to the elements. And so we kind of treat them very differently. Okay, so for these specific varieties out here, it is not an heirloom variety and it is a determinate variety, which basically means that these plants are developed to grow to a specific height. They are a determinate height tomato. And so we're not going to be trellising them like we would with the heirlooms, which are an indeterminate type. So we will be doing what we call a Florida weave on these, and it's basically doing some strings between the plants themselves to hold the plants upright and to keep the walkways clear, and then also to provide a little bit extra airflow that you wouldn't get otherwise. So it's basically just to get the plants up and off of the ground. The Florida weave you can use in a lot of different crops, actually. It's not specifically for tomatoes. You can use it if you're doing hot peppers or some other really bushy plants that have a tendency to fall under the size of their fruits or of their leaves. It's just a really basic technique to keep those plants upright. I used to farm up in Wisconsin. Up there it was pretty common. We didn't do a lot of the trellising techniques up in Wisconsin or in the colder climates just because you have a shorter growing period. So generally with some of those shorter growing periods, you will just do field tomatoes like this. You'll just grow them out and you'll do your Florida weave between all of the plants themselves. It just doesn't make sense to extend the season so far when you physically don't have the season to extend. So down here we have a lot more time to work with, so we are able to do our long season heirlooms as well as these shorter season determinate tomatoes. Okay, so as you can see here, I am wearing quite a lot of equipment. It's pretty much overkill for what I'm actually doing, but it allows me to have a bucket here in which I keep my bucket of twine. You can use basically any kind of twine you want. There's a lot of different thinner garden twine varieties out there that are made of like nylon or a type of a plastic. The one that we're using here is a jute, so it's biodegradable, which will actually cut down on the amount of time we have to spend taking all of this trellising down at the end of the season. This can all just go right into the compost pile with the plants themselves. So that has really significantly cut down on that amount of time that we spend pulling string out of plants. My bucket here, and then I've got my trusty little paring knife here so I can do a little pruning as I go, which is also important as you trellis these up. You want to be able to create that airflow underneath the plants. So this I like to call my trellising wand. I have no idea what else you would call it, but it works really well to be able to direct the trellising around our plants. So I've got my PVC pipe here. I've run my twine through the pipe and then attached it to my stake, my post. We've actually cut out holes here at the end so that I can actually hold it and I can pull tension on the line itself as I go. You can see we've got kind of a random assortment of posts here in the garden. I try to use whatever I can find. We've got some rebar in here, some biodegradable posts, some random other garden posts. Just as long as it's strong enough to hold itself up in the garden, that's all that's really important. You don't have to buy any of the fancy equipment if you don't need to. We are gonna go ahead and go around our plant. So the goal is to try and get the bottom, especially the bottom of your trellising, right around the actual base of the plant. And then as you go up, it will be supporting the plant itself. And so your shape of your trellising is going to be kind of a weave. So that's where the Florida weave comes through. So you're weaving in and out of each of the plants, and then you will go all the way down to one end of your row, and then you'll come back the opposite direction. So so that you're actually kind of holding them together. And it's okay if you catch some of the leaves. Now that the plants are getting taller, that's just going to be part of it, because we're not going to be taking the time to get all of these leaves pruned like we would the indeterminate tomatoes. And then once I get to a post, I like to do kind of a double loop just to hold it better in place. And then as you look down over the top of the trellis, you'll actually see that crisscross in between each plant. That's when you know you're doing it right. Generally speaking, you're going to be weaving at least once a week and possibly more than once a week. The plants are going to be getting really bushy really fast, and you just want to make sure you always have a clear walkway for that air circulation and just for you as a farmer to be able to get in and take care of the plants and later harvest the fruit. So we just finished our first pass all the way down the row, and now I'm going to go all the way back down to where I started, but I'm going to be going on the opposite side of each of the plants. So it kind of sandwiches it together between the two trellis lines. So we'll go ahead and start again here. And you'll kind of notice on some of the plants, it does seem to be pretty stressful to them when you're first doing these weaves, but they do tend to bounce back pretty quickly, which is nice. If you do have plants that die off, or if maybe when you were weaving you got a little too aggressive and the stem dropped off, so you can replace the plants as the season goes on and just kind of clip them up to the trellising so that as they grow you can kind of work them into the weave that you already have later on, because you want to get the highest yield possible. All right, so we have got back to the other end where we started. So now I'm going to go ahead and just tie it off just to hold it in place. So I'll usually step on it just to keep that tension, and then cut it with my trusty knife. Especially during the peak growing periods, you're going to keep checking your plants. Once they start putting on maybe 6 inches above what you've already got, you're going to want to keep going. So you're going to have several of these all the way up to the top. By the time these plants are done growing, they'll be about my height. And so that means that you're gonna have this trellis line running all the way up these stakes. And once they get to the top of the stake, I'll usually actually top the plants themselves because we don't have any more room to keep staking them, and so the plants will start flopping and they'll start to suffer that way. So we don't let them get taller than our stakes. If you want to have taller plants, you can always use taller stakes. There's like some T-posts that you can use that are, 8-10 feet tall. They're harder to get in the ground, but it'll allow for you to have a slightly longer growing season with your determinants. Thanks for watching this little video here on our Florida weave and our outside tomato production area. Like and subscribe if you find any kind of value in what we do here, and we can keep making some more market garden content for you.